Good morning, good afternoon, good evening for from wherever we are joining today to this session. Thank you so much for joining. I'm assuming that our session today is going to be focused on people joining from different financial institutions, could be banks, securities, insurances, etc. The intent of this discussion today is to discuss about how archival and data lakes are at an intersection point today and why the financial systems and other institutes should be thinking about their approaches for managing an enterprise-wide data strategy. With that, I'll start going ahead. So we are talking about archival. So whenever we talk about archival as such, uh, normally a question comes, why archival? Why should I even care about it? So here's why you should care about it. That you can see, as we are saying, that 90% of financial data, it is untouched after 90 days. Yet it's the first thing that a compliance regulator is going to ask for in an audit. It's not the production data. It might not be your analytical reports that are giving you a sense of customer sense, but it's the old data that you're actually not caring about that is asked during an audit. And all this data usually is found in storage systems like an archive. Now, talking when I say about and when I talk about an archive, what really is an archive? Well, it is many things, but not one. It's not a backup. People usually confuse archive for being a backup, and they'll be like, okay, so you're just taking backups and keeping it into your storage systems. Well, it's more than that. So a backup is basically a copy of data that we take point in time, and we collect it in different systems just to restore it back when there is a failure that arises. And the primary intent of doing a backup is for data recoverability and restoration. And it is always supposed to be point in time, and it will be a complete copy of the data that you've got. So if you are taking backups throughout the month, you will be essentially storing the same data for every day of the month, if that's what you're going after. And it will not be uh, any incremental changes or something. It will be point in time, that at that point, what is a snapshot. Whereas when we talk about an archive's primary intent is to make sure that historical data is preserved for governance and compliance. Now, there was an earlier time when archival was only done for reducing costs and storage. Today, when the whole storage system has evolved to a level that S3 buckets are cheaper than the entire storage of our phones. So now maybe the surging data is not the biggest reason why people want to archive, but there are so many other reasons that we will talk about. So archival basically moves data off of the production disk and makes sure that even after the data is moved out, it remains very accessible, and it is curated in a way that for audits and for making sure that the SLAs are met, all of this data is is properly cataloged and made sure that there is no delay in terms of whenever there is an audit, we should be able to provide the data immediately. So that's basically what the backup and archive difference is. And it's not a point in time copy. We will not keep taking complete copies, snapshots of data, unlike backup. And if we have to search data, for example, we will have much more flexibility than you have in a backup. In a backup, you'll have to restore everything back and then search it back, and then it's not cataloged well, and the metadata does not speak for itself, whereas an archive is all those things. So going a step deeper into why an archive, into why do we really want to do archival for financial systems. Um, so we have been into the archival and data management business for more than a decade now, 15 years, I think. And our core drivers when we started used to be these. It used to be managing data growth, that data is surging in production systems, have to manage it. Then unify data is there in different silos, and I have to unify all of it, deduplicate it, and bring it together. It used to be compliance that we have already seen a lot of regulators coming in and asking for historical data, which now is not governed. So there are no SMEs for historical data, right? There's a very high probability that there are no subject matter experts available for the data that's available right now, for the data that was created some time back. And so we will have to kind of, struggle when audit comes in that, okay, where my data is actually there. So for compliance was another reason. Discovery, legal discovery is again, we have times when there are right to informations and right to erase, right to forget, and when things like that come, subject access requests like that come into the system, we have to make sure that we are able to attend to them, cater to them, and we are able to provide responses within the agreed SLA. Then another reason was legacy system decommission. Now this is something that we see even today. When we talk about legacy systems, any old systems which used to run on mainframes, which used to run on even like old content systems and very old devices, all of those eventually reach end of life, and there is no support, and we have to kind of do something with the data. And when we are moving out of that particular software, we have to make sure that we archive data of that software before we move out, because we are talking about modernization here, right? So when we are modernizing, we might want to migrate only what's required, and let the other non-required and things that are required only for compliance kind of things stay back into an archival system. Okay, so that was another use case. And today also, I keep hearing end of lives is not something new, right? We keep hearing that the software is going end of life, and that's where we kind of come in and make sure that it is all preserved in the right manner. So new use cases that I see now are data risk transference. We are trying to get into SaaS, enterprise SaaS, and we are trying to say that, okay, I have a lot of sensitive data with me, and I would like to move it to your SaaS solution, and maybe the risk of handling the data can all be contained with the solution. This depends business from business. Then we see CMS archival. By CMS here, I mean content management systems like IBM CMOD, FileNet, etc. And we go so CMSs, long back, they were used for different reasons. They were used for purposes of storing reports in a deconstructed manner, and then when it has to be presented, they are all reconstructed with the outlays, with the content, with the metadata, and then presented out. But now these CMS systems are kind of going out of fashion, and people are moving more towards the data lake. So this also has become a need, and it's very, very challenging to take data out of content management systems because of the sheer nature of the way that it was saved. It's not saved very directly, right? It is always saved in a deconstructed manner. So just taking this data out becomes very challenging. But you end up paying for that CMS just because you cannot take the data out. So that is another reason. Then this is also an interesting requirement that there are old data warehouses that people want to kind of archive and move to a better data mesh, and those sorts of architectures. So that is also a requirement that we come across a lot. Then so enterprise archive. So this is kind of the next gen strategy that companies have started coming with, that they want to implement an enterprise wide archival strategy, which will make sure that their structured, unstructured, semi structured, all of that data is put together, and it's so a live archival workflow is set up to make sure that any data that gets created based on the retention of that data, it keeps getting archived. So that's what I covered, live archive and archive for analytics. Now, considering that data hubs are becoming so uh, evolved, and people don't want to keep spending money for different types of data stores, different for archival, different for analytics, different for warehousing. So it should not be that way. So now the archives have been repurposed in a way that they can directly be used for analytics and governance together. So that is another use case that we try to solve when we are working for institutions. So that this is about me telling why archival is not a problem of future, why it has to be a very proactive strategy that has to get into your data decisions and business decisions from day one. Talking about financial systems in particularly, the kind of data management concerns that we see that the organizations are facing today is that compliance has to be set up in that system by design. So there are GDPR articles and RBI regulations that mandate structured retention, and they have proper articles stating that structured retention is something that you have to have, and it is different for different data categories. For example, if we are talking about payroll data, then what sort of categories of that financial data have to be retained for how long? All of that has to be set up by design while the data is entering into the system, not while we are trying to move out of the system. So this is a race between our negligence and the auditors. If whoever wins, wins. Either our negligence wins or the auditor comes before we have really set up that compliance answerability. So compliance by design is a mandate by GDPR Article 25 as well, where and so they have different articles and different regulations, and it is kind of very important for us to start thinking about it based on different geographies. So GDPR will have its own, CCPA will have its own, PDPA will have its own, so all of that. Another reason is the storage bloat. So primary storage, while I say that maybe storage is not the biggest problem for archival, maybe from a cost perspective, yes, sure. But from an efficiency perspective, if we think about it, our storage systems that we have to have our production systems lightweight and not have a lot of old data which is not getting used immediately so that they can work efficiently. So the primary storage still needs to be kind of kept lightweight, and there should be live archival pipelines and mechanisms set up to keep retiring my data beyond a particular retention period into my archival systems. Another reason is audit SLAs. So regulators expect responses within 10 minutes for historical queries if there is any access request or anything. And if the old data is not, it has lost stewardship on it, it becomes impossible to handle that. Then legacy integrations. We have, as I said, there are a lot of legacy applications, core banking applications. We have call center applications like Avaya, wherein all of those are also going out of support. And then we have uh, core banking applications. We have our communication systems, for example, contact center applications. So all of that, while they are going out of support, we have to make sure that there are some API integrations available that keep working on it. And sometimes they are not. And legacy systems anyway did not support API integration. So it becomes very difficult and challenging for data analytics officers, for example, as a persona, if I consider that normally data analytics officers have this responsibility of making sure all the historical data is unified and analyzed in a way so that we can take out insights. But the challenge that they see in this process is that I'm not able to take data out of the old systems at all. So if I cannot take data out, how will I analyze it? So that is also a challenge that we try to solve from the grassroots level so that this data can actually move to a space where it can start getting enabled for analysis, etc. Then another thing that we see with FS is to scale on cloud. There are multiple regulations that that have limiting clauses that say that no, you cannot move to cloud for confidentiality reasons and for compliance reasons. So those are also some concerns that we roadblocks that we see in FS institutions that stop them from going ahead and from being competitive in the space of analytics and AI. So, yeah, we will be solving all these problems over the course of our next discussion and see how we can handle them. So these are some of the compliance concerns and regulation mappings that we have. We have come across them all the time. That there are rules which require us to keep data in non-rewritable, non-erasable format. So immutability of data. Then there are RBI master directions that say that you have to have 8-year minimum retention for financial records. Then there's other GDPR, PDPA, which all have certain types of limitations that we have to keep in mind for compliance. When I talk about, okay, how can I really manage this, how can I really think about archiving for compliance, is that first of all we have to make sure that our data inventory that is currently there, the entire data footprint that we have across different systems, has to be mapped with metadata or has to be mapped with an inventory together, to make sure that at any point when there is a request, we should be able to refer it back to its lineage, that where exactly could this data be, and then be able to provide responses. So that is one of the ways that we can make sure to start. Then we should be having, because we are saying archival, right? It can go over different cold storages and warm storages based on the behavior of users trying to access certain information, based on the age of that information. So there should be tiering of storage that we should be doing. Then life cycle management of the data, information life cycle management is super important, because it's not only that they are taking up space, it's that if you are saving some data characteristics beyond a certain point, you are actually going out of compliance. So that again is something that needs to be considered, and there have to be fixed retention policies that should be set up for every attribute of the data, to make sure that every data aspect, every data subject gets handled in the exact way that we want it to get handled. And then there has to be roles and authorization for the entire data that we are storing, even for historical data. The issue with historical data becomes that because there's no SME, the data loses stewardship and it becomes difficult to kind of make sure that who accesses or not. People will eventually say, okay, anybody can just go access, take out the report that is requested by the subject access request, and so that we don't go out of compliance. But no, we have to make sure that there has to be proper authorization that should be set up. Now, in order to really think about whether or not we should be worrying about an audit, we can maybe ask this question to ourselves: that how long does it take to retrieve a 7 or year old payroll record, or a 10-year-old payroll record during an audit? If your answer is greater than 10 minutes, you're in trouble. You have to start thinking about how you can make this come within a particular time frame. Otherwise, it's just about time that a compliance regulation audit might hit you, and you'll not be able to produce results, and you'll be slapped with a fine. So we have to first of all be very sure that we do not take a lot of time just to give this response out. Just to kind of understand our readiness of our audiences, would you like to answer this question for me, please, on the chat boxes? That how long does it really take for you to retrieve a 7-year-old payroll record? Let's say we have an audit coming, surprise audit coming, and they have asked for this. Could you quickly put down in chat how many seconds, minutes, or hours would it take for you, or days? I can see some responses. Yeah, so basically, if it's more than 10 minutes, I think we should rethink our strategy, our entire design strategy of how our enterprise data has been put in, because it should not be more than 10 minutes, if because majority compliance rules have SLAs of up to around that time, and if it's taking more than that, then we definitely need to reorganize our data and to rethink. So if I move on, so talking about data lakes and archival together today, it is important for us to understand that today most of the financial organizations, everybody is very, very competitive in the financial space, and we probably already have a data lake that we are working with. We 100% have a data lake that we are working with. Either it was implemented a while back or it's implemented now or whatever, but we definitely have a warehousing or an analytical system set up. So just to rethink about what we already have, we have to think that what an ideal data lake for a financial institution should look like. So what I've done here is I've used the Moscow framework to identify what should be a must have, should have, could have, and won't have category for a particular data lake. So, for financial institutions specifically, we have to make sure that our data lake must support out of the box regulatory compliance capabilities. Where if there are particular reports that GDPR and FINRA and Basel III they are asking for, there should be out of the box support to be able to provide that within a set limited time. It cannot be very long, so that we will be able to present it to our regulators. Then another one would be end-to-end encryption. We have to make sure that the data is kept protected. Another very important is having the storage as immutable. So talking about historical data and talking about compliance together, it is absolutely a no-no to let the data get changed after it comes into the system. So whichever system it's getting stored into has to be immutable by design, and we should not be having any capabilities to be able to modify a record that was saved in 7 years back. So another would be to have it scalable for structured and unstructured data, because banks have all sorts of documents that come in, and all sorts of PDFs that come in multiple multi-pager formats. We have to make sure that the storage caters to both structured and unstructured data, and catalogs both of them to make sure that the searching is easier. Metadata and lineage tracking, it has to just we have to be very, very confident that the lineage is tracked, so that if tomorrow there's any requirement of getting some data out, we will know where to get that out from, or where it was changed, or when it was captured. So that source of truth has to be available. And of course, there has to be authorization that has to be captured. So there should be role-based access control on column level, record level, field level, attribute level. All of that granular access must be available to make sure that our authorization in place and the right person gets access to the right information. These are definite must-have categories that cannot be compromised for a financial system. Moving on, if we talk about what could be a good to have category, it would be real time data ingestion. We have to make sure that there is. So, talking about what could be our should have categories for features that we are talking about, we should be able to have real time data ingestion for streaming systems that are coming from production. We should be able to have core banking app native integration, so that if there's anything that's coming out from the native systems, we will be able to have a chain of chain of data travel set up, so that the any live data that comes in gets ingested here. Then third, we should be able to have automated retention and deletion policies. This is more of a must-have than should have, but yes. And then there should be self-service analytics access. So whatever data that really comes into the archive should be getting self-serviced in a way that it should manage its own life cycle, and it should also have analytic systems that can give analytic results specific to financial use cases. Then if we want more, yes, it will be good to have an AI ML model training in integration. There should be workflows that are available out of the box for finance. We should be having a data marketplace for internal data reuse if required, multilingual support, and so on and so forth. So, what we have to be careful about here is that what should be my must have and should have, and make sure today, if you have any data lake system that you are using in your financial institution, you have to make sure that at least these two categories are met as a qualifying criteria for you to be able to imagine that particular system to stay in your organization for a sustainable period of time. Yeah. If I move on, you might have seen that I'm talking about an archival side of things and a data lake side of things. And we don't really, we have to kind of see where do they meet. Now, so I come from Platform 3 and we have a stack of products, which is the Archon suite of products. And we kind of make sure that we meet both these requirements together on archival and data lake. So in terms of archival, we have to make sure that everything that was there under everything that is all the data that is there has to have basic capabilities like compression, embedded security, um, architecture for searching and cataloging, automatic indexing, and governance in general. And on the other hand, because that particular archive has to act as a data lake also, we have to make sure that there are financial workflows purpose built for analytics and federated queries that will help us access data as if it was a generic system, and it just helps with a very um, with guaranteed time SLA meeting, so that we can make sure that we are kind of getting response in time. So these are two major categories of attributes of archival and data lake that we have married together when we were considering the whole concept of creating our data store. So I'll very quickly cover this. Here we have Archon Analyzer, ETL, and Data Store in the suite. And Archon Analyzer basically makes sure that we have connectors set up for legacy systems and for old systems and all sorts of modern and new systems that we can connect with, understand their relationships, and crawl data, and just make sure that we can identify the parts where financial data actually lies. So this product suite is purpose built for financial systems. So we can be rest assured that everything that's happening throughout the course of action comes from a rooted intelligence of having financial knowledge embedded into the system. So analyzer can identify all those metrics for where the data lies, how old is the data, what data you should be really thinking about archiving, what data would should you be thinking about migrating to a modern architecture, and what data you should actually just get rid of, it's not required. So those sort of insights come in from analyzer. Then we go ahead and we talk about how actually we can move it, and that's where ETL's legacy connectors come into picture. We are able to not only connect with legacy and modern source systems, but also able to extract data from their systems as well as extract pre-built reports that are available in the source system and be able to ingest them into our data store. So this capability of being able to extract reports from the source system makes it very, very useful for users to make sure after the system is decommissioned, after the source system is decommissioned, they can still use the source data, the historical data that's required in similar kind of access patterns that they had seen in the source system. So having a report extracted and ingested into an archival system and be able to see exactly the same data without really configuring it on the system is comes very, very handy after decommissioning. Also, now when we talk about our data store in particular, our data store here would be is a centralized data storage, which makes sure that we have governance and compliance and embedded security built in into the system. supporting advanced analytics specifically for financial systems, making sure that there are reports and workflows, one-click workflows available to be able to do analytics for fraud detection, for a few other use cases that I'll be talking about going further. So, talking about archival again, trying to connect the dots between archival and Archon Data Store here. Archon Data Store is the two things that we have to remember from up till now is Archon Data Store is purpose built for financial systems, and it has all the capabilities of making sure financial compliances are met when we are when data is stored into ADS. So that's basically the main value prop that we are talking about here. And when we go into understanding how Archon Data Store can really do that, it's all of this. So we have a centralized governance and compliance engine where we make sure that our data is kept accessible at all points. So I'll start clockwise and try to cover all points. Data is made accessible at all points. There are multiple ways. I think I have a slide for it. So you can see the data can be accessed via APIs. There are particular screens, which we also called reports from the source system, that are made available for user to access data. There are database like queries that we can trigger on the engine that can give data out, like native SQLs. And there are native dashboards that are built within the system that we can leverage to identify to walk through a complete financial use case up to visualization. And then we have BI tool integrations available which can further correct connect downstream to Tableau and Power BI. So talking about other aspects here, about data lifecycle management again, it's super essential to have retention policies, hold rules set up into the system to make sure that we do not hold any data for more or less than the designated and allowed time. We have to make sure that all this data is managed in a self-sustainable sort of a fashion, and based on like not based on human interference, that okay, somebody has to really come look at the data and only then it will get handled. Then the Archon Data Store has to make sure that for governance, we have a unified storage where all the data can come together, and structured, unstructured, all of that data can come together. Metadata has to be managed. We also work on making sure that there are particular modules that we can use to make sure that there is a master copy of customer data that is available, so that metadata management and also master data management is handled at that level. Democratization, making sure all the authorized users access data in terms of geography, in terms of if geofencing is required, to make sure that only a user of particular geographies can access data of particular geographies. All of that needs to be established because that's very, very important for compliance. Then, with respect to encryption, it has to be encrypted end to end. There has to be quality mapping that has to be done for every bit of data that we store, and classification of data to understand how much of this data is master data, how much of this data is transaction data, how much of this is actually payroll data, how much of this is account receivable, how much is general ledger. So, all of that, because we are saying that there's financial intelligence built into the system, it is we have the capability to kind of cluster all the data categories with the data that's held into the system, discover those categories, and present it to the user in a way that even if they have not seen this, even if they do not have subject matter experts to be able to do this categorization for them, we will be able to do that, and the product will be able to do that and show it to the users. There are catalogs maintained for e-discovery, etc. And then one very critical feature that I would like to cover at the last is the data bunker. So I'm a little short of time, Sindhuja, so I'll take questions at the last, if that's okay. Okay, sure. Okay. All right. So talking about a data bunker, Data bunker is an air-gapped, secure system that makes sure that the sensitive data gets accessed only in a different bunker-like situation. Now, I'll talk further about how this works over here. Okay. So, data bunker basically is a repository where we store only sensitive data, and all this data is tokenized and pseudonymized and stored in a different repository. So you can see over here that we have all the data coming into Archon data store, and Archon data store automatically divides this data based on regular data and sensitive data. This differentiation is done based on the regime that has to be followed. By regime, I mean whether it has to comply by GDPR or it has to comply by PDPA or DPDPA for that matter. And based on this, we have this differentiation of data category. And whatever is the regular data moves to the data lake repository, and whatever is sensitive goes into the data bunker in a with a particular tokenization identifier, and that particular token is the only thing that's stored in the data lake repository. Now, at any point of time, if the user comes in and tries to see what my sensitive data is, user can never do that directly without hitting a bunker API through Archon data store. So data will be requested. It will be hit through a bunker API. Because it's actually in the bunker, you cannot really get that data out from anywhere. Whatever you will get out will be tokenized, so it will not mean anything to you. So we have that data requested with from the data bunker, and it's mapped to the token from the data lake repository and given out through the bunker API response. This particular data bunker database itself is encrypted with transparent data encryption. So at any point, if somebody just comes in and tries to look at the data bunker's data, they will not be able to really make out what's happening there. So from all points considered, whatever data lies in the bunker attains, it has the maximum security. Talking about that features of data bunker itself, it is secure and air gapped. It is not kept in the same system where the production data is lying, so it's logically air gapped. Then it is tokenized in a way that we will have different types of, there are about 6 types of tokenization available for this encryption, and based on the kind of data that we are looking at, based on the kind of field that we are looking at, we will have a format preserving tokenization, we will have a limited access tokenization, we will have a we have about 6 types of it that we can make sure that the system automatically defines that okay, this type of tokenization works for this data. Okay. Now, talking about further about the data itself, there is transparent data encryption put on the database, making sure that the data is on the bunker database is also protected. About any data that is tried to be accessed by someone who is not an authorized user, we make sure that we capture each and every audit trail that somebody who doesn't have access to this data actually tried to access this data. So the all the audit trails of data access are maintained, and we are able to make sure that at the point of any audit, we are able to present all of that information, and we also be able to track anomalous behavior, etc. And then retention of this data and life cycle of this data is also managed within the system to make sure that sensitive data along with regular data gets all goes into a purge life cycle based on what the requirement for that data is. So another thing that why I have seen Archon Data Store getting adopted a lot by financial institutions lately is a very big reason for that is data bunker. Because when we talk about scaling up, and banks try to move to cloud, we have seen that there are multiple regulations that stop us from moving to cloud. So I remember we did this for a South America insurance company where they wanted to move a lot of data onto the cloud and start scaling up, but they did not really they were not allowed by the regulations of that place. So they decided that they are going to store all this data, sensitive data. They're going to segregate their sensitive data and store it in a data bunker on prem. And all the regular data that will be required for further analytics, they will try to move it on the cloud. And that's how they actually they moved ahead with cloud adoption, and they were able to kind of make sure that their security is met, and they have also upscaled themselves to be a cloud solution, and they are able to leverage analytics, etc., that were given on cloud. So that's where I feel data bunker comes very, very, very handy, and it has been adopted so greatly by financial institutions because the access to and the idea that they can move to cloud has kind of opened up for them. Talking about life cycle management, that I've been mentioning throughout. Life cycle management is a process of retention, purge, and hold. When I talk about retention, it means how long the data should be retained. When I talk about hold, it means that if there is any litigation or any legal proceeding happening on some data that is involved in that legal proceeding, that must be held by the system and cannot be removed until that hold is lifted or until that proceeding is finished. And when we talk about purging, it's about defensible disposition of that data that is entered to this into the system to make sure that all this data purges out of the system eventually only after multiple approvals. So what you see here is that a regular purge process, how it happens is that when the data enters into the system, into the lake, it must be accompanied with a retention policy. It could be infinite retention, that is okay, but there has to be a retention policy that must be established for that particular data record, or that entire table or DB or whatever. It can be set up on record level, search level, table level, application level, all of that. So the retention policies are mandatory to be set up to start with, and they come up with some defaults also. And as we move ahead, after the system eventually kind of qualifies data elements for a retention period, we will be able to see that this much data has been qualified for retention and this is now ready. And that particular data is called a candidate purge list in our terms. So what you see below here in purge process is that we see that we look at purge list candidates, we find eligible items, we create purge candidate lists, we wait for the approval, and once we get the approval, we have the data disposed out. This is called defensible disposition because there are multiple steps involved in this entire process, and it has all this is all regulated by particular stakeholders of the organization that have access to do it, to approve it, right? And then after all of this is done, we get a solid data destruction certificate, which means that okay, why this data was destructed or disposed, it is all kept very intangible proofs for any audit that might happen later. So that is why we call it as defensible disposition, because of number one, there are multiple step approvals and processes. There are retention policies that are qualified periodically, and then there are data destruction certificates that are generated out of at the end when this data gets disposed. So, okay, I'll quickly move on further. So, Argon Data Store, one reason why again it gets adopted by financial systems a lot is because as a data lake, Argon Data Store has on-prem, cloud, and multi-cloud and hybrid sort of deployment options, which will make sure that it's not mandatory. Like I was talking, that if the bank has to move to cloud, and we really want to enable them for analytics, but it's becoming difficult because of the regulations, then we can do a hybrid deployment for them, making sure that the data bunker stays on-prem and the other information goes on cloud. We can also do a complete on-prem and so on and so forth. So that is why the adoption is that high. So I'll quickly move into some use cases that are particular for banks. So here what you see is, so Archon Data Store is a data lake that is again purpose built for banks, and it makes sure that all the intelligence of the system has been brought in, of the financial workflows has been brought in, and we will be able to kind of set up one click analysis workflows. What you see over here is a pre-built workflow for risk analysis. We have pre-built data models for credit, market, liquidity, operational flows, etc. And because again, since the system understands financial data and the data subjects that are involved in the whole process and the contexts that are involved, we are able to kind of identify data models for all of them. And after, you can see in this five-step procedure that after data comes in, after the ingestion of data happens, there is a number of workflows that the user can choose from, that these are all by workflows, and then it can get mapped, and metrics and alerts and triggers can be set up, and we can see dashboard reports. So the only step that the user mandatorily has to take is identify which workflow they want to go into. We have one more for real-time transaction analytics that kind of helps out. So we could have gone into this in more detail, but if anybody wants to know more about this, they can drop in the comments, and we can explain them better later. Talking about when we say that we have a lot of legacy connectors, this is our list of all the connectors that we have inside Archon that we can take data out of. And I remember somebody spoke about DBT also here. I'm not sure if DBT is there in this list, but yes, we have supported DBT archival before for all scripting sort of systems. Maybe for the sake of time, Sindhuja, we can provide them with how we have done that with a success story for a DBT archival. So, about further about this, we make sure that financial systems are enabled with the exact kind of workflows that they need instead of getting into generic data lakes. And that is the challenge that we have been seeing, that as I'm mentioning, everybody here might be already having a data lake where they are putting all their financial systems. It's very much obvious. But as I was discussing, you have to make sure that your data lake kind of satisfies our Moscow categories, that whatever are my must have and should have items, like I have mentioned here, they should definitely be available on your system. And if they are not, maybe it's time for you to think. I think I'm at the top of the hour. Do we have any questions? Can you please quickly put them down in the comments? I can see one right now. Okay. Uh, are you a product company or a services company? We are a product company, and we have trusted service partners with Capgemini and others that we work with to deliver our product offerings, and we've been together for a very long time. So I can see some questions. Maybe I can take one, Sindhuja. There are more nuanced data classification other than GDPR and the rest of the data. Is it possible to differentiate based on company-based classification criteria? Yes, of course. So very well captured, right? That it's every data is different, and every industry. So industry here we are talking only about financials. So talking about every organization, how they store their data, it is a lot of categories that are there. There are embedded rule engines in the system where you can set up classification metrics, where the system can also go through and kind of identify group information where those metrics lie. So long answer short is that yes, we have rule engines that we can set up for our data classification to happen according to the context that you care about. And we call it the data descriptor rule engine in Archon Analyzer. So we do have that. What all geographies we have worked in a lot of, I think we have our platform 3 side. Maybe I'll put in. We have worked in all the geographies. There's no limitation. We have worked in the Europe. We worked in Australia. I'm in Singapore, so we have a lot of clients in this area in Southeast Asia and the USA, of course. And these are our offices that you can see. We have presence. We have physical offices in these areas, and about few more are coming in Europe and US as well. Um, that is what it is. So I have a question. I can see for structured data archiving, how does this work, and can display an illustration how this is implemented. For the storage repository, must this sit on cloud or can be stored on premises? Do you have compression as a default? Yes, yes, and yes. For structure, we do have compression as a default option. We will be able to. We have seen up to 80% compression come out, because again, let's not forget that I'm also saying that it works fabulously as an archive. So compression kind of comes as a prerequisite. So yes, and must this sit on cloud or can be stored on premise? It can be both. As I said, that we have multiple deployment options in one of the slides. It can be on cloud, on premise. It could be a combination. It could be like sensitive data only on premise by on-prem data bunker sort of a solution. So yes, banks have issue with scaling on cloud. I think I have already answered this. And I think we have seen some success stories, case studies. I can share some success stories. I think they are there on our blogs also. So we can get back to you on that. So, talking about why now, right? Talking about why are we having this conversation today? Why should I start caring about archival now, is because there are recently we have seen, I think I've already given you why data archival answers before, but we have seen a lot of content systems and a lot of contact center systems and payroll systems going out of support and end of life. And you cannot just let them go end of life and assume that you'll be okay. You have to make sure that the data that they have is kept somewhere securely before you lose access to it, right? So yeah, that was it, people. Thank you so much for joining in. The idea here is to kind of make sure that we understand why an enterprise wide archival strategy is important, number one. And number two, why a generic data lake doesn't support all the financial needs. And we should kind of think that does our data lake solve all the criteria that I was mentioning about earlier? And does it really solve for your systems? Does it really solve for financial systems? Or is it just solving a generic problem of analytics and everything is left on you to customize, everything is left on you to kind of struggle around? And yeah, that's something that's not ideal. So we should be proactive rather than being reactive now, before compliance hits us, or before we have invested too much time and effort and money on an infrastructure that's not going to result in a lot of benefits uh, in the future. So that is it. Please drop in any questions that you may have, and my team will reach out to you for sure. And we do these webinars regularly. So if you are interested in being a part of these webinars, we do have a Telegram channel that we can add you to, and we can keep sharing insights over there, and you can keep joining us. Thank you so much.